So you probably clicked on this video because you want to get into fantasy, but every time you pick one up, it is 900 pages with a map in the beginning, 16 kingdoms, 7 points of view, and these names you just cannot figure out how to pronounce.
As always, my companions and Carl are with me.
Fantasy can totally be overwhelming if you're new to the genre, and that's why today I want to share the books that turned me into a fantasy reader. They're fun, immersive, easy to follow, and totally addictive, even if you've never read the genre before. So if you're ready to fall in love with the fantasy genre, this is where I'd start. Hey, I'm Meg, and if you're new here, welcome to Good Bookery. But if you've been here for a while, you've probably noticed my channel's been a little bit silent, and well, that's because I'm pregnant. I have been so busy growing another human being, being a mom to a toddler, and just like trying to keep up with life in general that I have not prioritized filming. The algorithm tends to kind of like bully you if you've been gone for a while. If you would not mind showing this video a little bit more love than you might usually by liking, commenting, or if you're new, subscribing, that would be amazing. Thank you all for showing up here and being a part of the Good Bookery community. If you've watched any of my videos, you probably already know the first book that I'm gonna recommend. That is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. And not just the first book, but the entire trilogy had me hooked the entire way. The book is about a girl named Jude, a mortal who's been raised in the world of the Fae. This entire series is full of court politics, betrayal, twisted alliances, and the kind of enemies to lovers romance that genuinely makes you want to scream at the pages. I may or may not have done that. So if you're the type of reader who lives for morally gray characters and you want something dark and dramatic without being overly sinister or heavy, this is the book for you. Start your fantasy journey here. Okay, the next book that I'm gonna recommend kind of took the fantasy world by storm. It is a duology, Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and I was completely captivated by these books. It is about gods, ancient gods, at war, but the heart of the story is about these two budding and aspiring writers who begin writing letters to each other through magical typewriters anonymously. It's emotional and lyrical and really romantic in that old-fashioned sort of way, but with a touch of magic. These books are very accessible to people who have never read the fantasy genre before because they really read like historical fiction with a divine twist. The next book that I'm gonna recommend genuinely gives all of the traditional classic fairy tale vibes. That is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. Again, if you like this one, you have nothing to worry about because it is a trilogy, so you get not 1, 2, but 3 fairy tale stories in the same universe. In this book, the main character, Evangeline, makes a desperate deal with the Prince of Hearts to stop the boy she loves from marrying someone else. But as soon as that deal happens, things just spiral out of control. If you are the type of girl that loved the movie Ella Enchanted, I think you will also enjoy this book. It is whimsical and fun and very innocent. It reads very youthful. So keep that in mind if you want something with more high stakes drama and tension. This isn't going to be the book for you, but if you just want something that quite literally feels like a glittering fairy tale, pick up this book. The next book I'm going to recommend is one I have mentioned on my channel before, and that is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. The fact that I just mentioned Sanderson may have intimidated you, but don't let that scare you. Tress of the Emerald Sea is the coziest fantasy I've read to date. It is totally approachable, and major perk for newbies to the genre is that it is a standalone. So there is no commitment to picking up this book. You don't have to finish the trilogy. It's not a duology. It's a one and done fantasy adventure. I'm gonna do my best to explain this book, but in all honesty, I have never read anything like this as a reader who reads quite a bit of books. It is very quirky, if I had to explain it. The main character drinks a lot of tea. She embarks on a journey with pirates. The sea that they sail upon is not actually made of water, but these spores that are magical. There's a talking rat in this book. You can see my dilemma here. It is quite odd in the best way. It is hard to explain, but that's why you just have to read it for yourself. The next book that I'm going to recommend is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. If I had to sum this book up in one line, I would say that it is The Hunger Games, but make it vampires. So our main character, Araya, is the adopted daughter of the vampire king, and she has to compete in this tournament where if she wins, she gains all power, but literally everyone else dies. So, dark. But highly entertaining. It has this incredible world building and dramatic tension throughout the book that was very immersive for me and made the book really hard to put down. The twist at the end of this book left my jaw on the floor. There have only been a few instances where while I'm reading, I audibly gasp or slam the book shut in surprise, or on occasion throw it across the room because I cannot bear to believe what I just read is what's going on. That was this book for me. This book does contain quite a bit of spice, which for me personally is a bit outside of my comfort zone, something that I tend to try to avoid or skip over when possible. So just throwing that out there, if you're someone who has the same reading taste as me, that's something to watch out for. But that being said, if you're someone who likes dark fantasy, high stakes, a lot of drama and competition, and vampires, of course, this is a book for you. The next book I'm going to recommend, if you have not heard of this one, I will be quite shocked. It is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I love this series, but I will say there is one caveat, and that is, for me personally, the very first book kind of felt redundant in a way that too closely, for my taste, mimicked the plot of the Hunger Games. Around 50% of the way through the book, things start to diverge from the Hunger Games, and the author really comes into her own. The plot takes on a life of its own that doesn't make you feel like you're just reading fan fiction of the Hunger Games. I loved the second book. The novella, it was okay. It wasn't for me personally. I'm not gonna diss it because I know like a lot of people really did enjoy it. For me, it kind of just felt like disjointed at times, but it was still fun to read. I finished the whole thing, so clearly it was not that unenjoyable for me. And fun fact, the third book of the trilogy, I think it's a trilogy, I'm just gonna call it the series. The third book of the series just came out, and I got my hands on a copy this last weekend. I am obsessed with the cover. It is quite thick. I mean, the font in it is like really spaced out and big though. So, ooh, my bookmark. I think it'll be easy to like fly through this. I'm already in the middle of another book and I'm tempted to just put that on pause so I can jump into this one. I am so excited to see where this story goes. My camera died, so hopefully this looks similar to what you were just watching. Anyways, Powerless. If you are someone who likes fast-paced, high stakes, and you enjoy like CW shows like Vampire Diaries, Riverdale, I could really see you enjoying a series like this. The next book I'm going to recommend, I do not feel like I could make this video without recommending this. Because this is pretty much the staple series for anyone who is into the fantasy, romantasy genre. That is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. At this point, this entire series is basically its own genre. It has coined its own noun, ACOTAR, just to like label and sum up the series. Like, that's not even a word. People are so obsessed with this series. We have now given this series its own new title, ACOTAR, and everyone knows what you're talking about, even if you haven't read it before. That says something. I'm not going to dive in too deep here because there are tons of videos out there all about ACOTAR and book influencers convincing you to read this one. So I'll just say this. Book 1 sets the stage, and book 2 is where people start like canceling their plans to stay home and finish the series. So if you've tried it before and like you didn't really get it, you weren't that into it, you have to get to book 2. It's just the way it is. Obviously, this series starts out light on the spice, and by the end of it, it is very spicy. So that's something to be aware of. That made the end of the series less enjoyable than I would have liked it to be, just because that's something that I try to, again, like I said earlier, avoid in my reading. But overall, the plot is really good. The series is amazing, especially to people who are new to the fantasy genre. Now, while we're talking about Sarah J. Maas, I may as well just go ahead and mention my next book recommendation, or books I recommend. The entirety of the Throne of Glass series. I have finally read through the entire series. It took me about like 7 months because I was only reading one book a month. I wasn't gonna try to just like only read that series, but it is so good. And after finishing the series, I totally understand the hype. I liked this better than ACOTAR. I understand why people might recommend ACOTAR as like an entryway into fantasy. I just did. However, I just gravitated towards these books more so than I did ACOTAR. The only caveat is there's a lot of books and they are quite long, but they are all very much worth it in my opinion. Those are all the fantasy books that I have read and do recommend to newbies. But let's move on into part 2 of this video, which is fantasy books on my personal TBR. One of the books on my TBR has been on my TBR for quite a while, and I've actually attempted to read it 2 times and given up. This was before my fantasy era though. This was when I didn't really understand magic systems and fae and just the concept of world building in general when it comes to these fantastic worlds made by these authors. And that is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. If you Google fantasy books that I should read or top fantasy books, this is going to make the list every single time. And so I feel like I owe it to the Mistborn series to read it all the way through without stopping. And I am committed. The next time I pick this book up, I will not DNF it. So what I remember about this book is the world is basically ash. The sky is ash. This group of rebels attempt to like overthrow him. And from the magic system, I remember they ingest these different types of metals, which then in turn give them different abilities. And when I first picked up this book, it was so foreign to me to have a magic system like this that I was like taking notes. I was like, when ingesting aluminum, this character gets this ability. When ingesting iron, it was too much. I just didn't get the concept of like letting go. You know what? Jump into the world head first. You'll understand it the more you read it. You don't need to take notes. Hopefully, the third time I pick up this book, I will be able to remember that concept and dive into this series completely without unnecessary note-taking. The next book that is on my TBR is Caraval, and I know I'm really late to the party on this one, but I wasn't a fantasy reader when this was popular, so you have to cut me some slack. Also, I have read Stephanie Garber. As I mentioned earlier, Once Upon a Broken Heart was also written by her, and I just love that book. So I'm really excited to read one of her earlier works because I'm confident I'm gonna love it. I'm a little bit like ashamed to even say this because it's been on my shelf for so long. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Again, I know I'm late to the party. You don't have to tell me. I have read Leigh Bardugo before and I love her writing. The last fantasy book on my TBR is Lightlark. Now, some people love this book and I've seen a lot of reviews of people who don't like this book, and that actually makes me want to read it more because I want to figure out where I personally land and if this book is my taste or not. It sounds like a mix of fantasy, romance, and political scheming, and that is right up my alley. All right. That's a lot of books, and that's all I have for today. If you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments which ones you've loved or which ones I should pick up next. And if you're new to fantasy, I hope this video has helped you to find something you'll love and not feel overwhelmed. Please don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!